Hi everyone, welcome back to Mr. Night Scare's story. Before you drift off, let me know in the comments where you're listening from if you're enjoying the stories. Don't forget to like and subscribe now. Let's relax and jump into tonight's case. Story 1. Sometimes the truth is more terrifying than fiction. A missing woman, a desperate search, and a case that remained unsolved for years until a chilling discovery turned everything upside down. This is the story of Lauren Caldwell and the mystery that haunted an entire town. Lauren Caldwell was a 28-year-old aspiring journalist from Denver, Colorado. She was known for her adventurous spirit and deep curiosity about the world. On October 14, 2012, she left her apartment for what was supposed to be a short road trip to visit her parents in Boulder. She never arrived. Her car, a silver Honda Civic, was found abandoned on a desolate stretch of Highway 36, with no signs of struggle. The doors were locked, her purse and phone were still inside, but there was no trace of Lauren. It was as if she had vanished into thin air. Witnesses later came forward, stating they had seen a woman matching Lauren's description hitchhiking near the area where her car was found, but no one could confirm if it was really her. Police followed every lead, but nothing substantial came of it. Authorities launched a massive search effort. Helicopters, K-9 units, and volunteers scoured the area. But days turned into weeks, and there were no solid leads. Her phone records showed the last call she made was to a close friend at 7:43 p.m., but nothing seemed out of the ordinary. Surveillance footage from a nearby gas station showed Lauren calmly refueling her car just an hour before she disappeared. Her family pleaded for answers, but none came. Investigators interviewed friends, ex-boyfriends, and colleagues, but no one seemed to have any motive to harm her. Then, years later, an eerie discovery reopened the case in the most disturbing way possible. In 2019, 7 years after Lauren's disappearance, hikers exploring a remote area in the Rocky Mountains stumbled upon something horrifying: a rusted-out storage container, hidden deep in the woods. Inside, they found scattered personal belongings, including a faded leather notebook. The name on the inside cover? Lauren Caldwell. Authorities rushed to the site, and what they uncovered was beyond disturbing. The container held human remains. DNA testing later confirmed they belonged to Lauren. But the nightmare was far from over. Inside the container, police found something even more unsettling: a series of handwritten letters, seemingly addressed to Lauren, filled with twisted confessions of love, obsession, and regret. The handwriting analysis led investigators to Daniel Reeves, a former co-worker of Lauren's who had abruptly left Denver just weeks after she vanished. He had always been quiet, reserved, someone who faded into the background. But what they uncovered about him painted a disturbing picture. Who wrote these letters? Who was behind Lauren's disappearance? Investigators linked the handwriting to a man named Daniel Reeves, who had moved to Arizona in 2013. But when authorities tracked him down, they found something shocking. He had died in a car accident in 2016. However, the letters hinted at an accomplice. Mentions of "we" and references to another person sent chills down investigators' spines. Did Daniel abduct Lauren? If so, why was she found years later in a location he had no known connection to? And most importantly, did he act alone? Further investigation revealed that Daniel had ties to an underground online forum dedicated to disappearing without a trace. Conversations recovered from his old emails hinted at another user who seemed particularly interested in Lauren's case. A user authorities were never able to identify. Despite the discovery, the case remains unsolved, leaving Lauren's family with more questions than answers. The chilling mystery of Lauren Caldwell continues to haunt those who follow true crime. Because sometimes, even when the truth is uncovered, it only leads to more darkness. If you found this case as disturbing as we did, let us know your thoughts in the comments. Do you think Daniel acted alone? Could there still be someone out there who knows the full truth? Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more chilling true crime stories. Until next time, stay safe and stay curious. Story 2. Not all missing persons cases end with answers. Some vanish without a trace. leaving behind only fragments of a mystery that may never be solved. This is the story of Evan Matthews, a man whose disappearance seemed almost impossible. No evidence, no witnesses, and one disturbing clue that only deepened the mystery. Evan Matthews was a 35-year-old architect from Portland, Oregon. He lived a quiet but successful life, known for his meticulous nature and love for hiking. On the evening of June 9, 2017, Evan left his downtown office as usual. Security footage showed him walking towards his car in the parking garage. But what happened next defied explanation. At exactly 8:42 p.m., Evan's phone sent a single text message to his sister, Emily. It read, "Need to leave. Not safe." Emily tried to call him immediately, but his phone had already been turned off. That was the last time anyone heard from Evan. When Evan failed to show up for work the next day, his coworkers grew concerned. His apartment was untouched. Keys on the counter, his wallet still in the drawer. His car was still parked in the garage. But Evan was gone. Police launched an investigation, combing through hours of surveillance footage. The strange part? No cameras ever caught Evan leaving the parking garage. It was as if he had simply vanished within its concrete walls. Weeks passed with no answers. Then, a janitor cleaning the lower levels of the garage found something eerie. Evan's work ID badge, tucked into a crack in the wall. Investigators were baffled. How did it get there? And more importantly, where was Evan? Digital forensics experts attempted to track Evan's phone, but all activity ceased after the mysterious text to Emily. His bank accounts remained untouched. No social media activity. It was as if he had been erased from existence. Speculation ran wild. Some believed Evan had been kidnapped. Others suspected he had planned his own disappearance. But those closest to him insisted he had no reason to leave his life behind. Then came a disturbing revelation. 6 months before he vanished, Evan had confided in a friend about a shadowy figure that seemed to be following him. He described an unsettling pattern. Late-night footsteps behind him. Fleeting glimpses of a man in dark clothing watching from a distance. Could this mysterious figure have played a role in Evan's disappearance? Or was it simply paranoia? The more investigators dug, the less they found. No known enemies. No history of mental illness. Just a man who walked into a parking garage one evening and was never seen again. Story 3. Some crimes leave behind evidence. Others leave behind only questions. And then there are those cases so bizarre, so unexplainable, that they defy all logic. This is the story of Rebecca Holt, a young woman who stepped into an elevator one fateful night and was never seen again. Rebecca Holt was a 27-year-old graphic designer living in Chicago. Smart, creative, and full of life, she had no known enemies. But on the night of November 3rd, 2018, something inexplicable happened. Security footage from her apartment building at 11:58 p.m. shows Rebecca entering the lobby, looking over her shoulder as if someone were following her. She steps into the elevator, presses the button for her floor, and then something strange happens. The elevator doors close, but Rebecca never reaches her floor. The elevator arrives at its destination, the doors open, and the cabin is empty. Rebecca is gone. When Rebecca didn't show up for work the next morning, her friends became concerned. Calls went straight to voicemail. Her apartment was locked from the inside, her belongings undisturbed. But Rebecca herself was nowhere to be found. Authorities pored over hours of surveillance footage, but there were no signs of her ever leaving the building. It was as if she had vanished into thin air. Then came the most disturbing discovery yet. While inspecting the elevator system, technicians noticed something unusual. Between the 12th and 14th floors, the elevator briefly stopped. On a floor that did not exist on the building's official blueprints, this hidden level, an unregistered space between floors, was sealed off decades ago during renovations. But the elevator logs confirmed that it had stopped there for exactly 43 seconds the night Rebecca disappeared. Investigators pried open a maintenance hatch and stepped inside. What they found was chilling. The space was filled with old office furniture, scattered papers, And in the center of the room, Rebecca's phone, lying face up, still powered on, with a single missed call from an unknown number. What happened to Rebecca Holt? Some believe she was the victim of foul play, that someone was waiting for her on that hidden floor. Others think she may have stumbled upon something she was never meant to see. And then, there are the theories that defy reality itself. The maintenance workers who first entered the hidden floor reported feeling an overwhelming sense of dread. Some claimed to hear faint whispers in the darkness. Paranormal investigators were later called in, and their equipment picked up inexplicable fluctuations in energy. Was Rebecca taken? Did she uncover a long-forgotten secret? Or did she step into something beyond our understanding? The only certainty is that she was never seen again. Story 4. Some crimes are brutal, some are senseless, and then there are those that seem almost impossible. A case with no clear suspects, no known motive, and only one chilling clue left behind. This is the story of Jonathan Blake, the man who disappeared from a locked hotel room. Jonathan Blake was a 42-year-old financial consultant from Seattle. On March 12, 2021, he checked into the Grand Haven Hotel in San Francisco for a 3-day business trip. By all accounts, it was just another routine stay. Security footage showed him entering his room, number 724, alone at 9:47 p.m. That was the last time he was seen. The next morning, when he failed to show up for his meeting, his colleagues grew concerned. Calls went straight to voicemail. Hotel staff were sent to check on him. But when they reached room 724, they found something that defied explanation. Jonathan's room was locked from the inside. The chain was still latched, the windows sealed shut. His suitcase, laptop, and wallet were undisturbed. But Jonathan himself was gone. There were no signs of struggle, no forced entry, just a single message written on the bathroom mirror in condensation. "Don't look for me." Police reviewed security footage from the entire floor. No one had entered or exited his room after him. There was no back entrance, no hidden passage. He had simply vanished. Authorities launched an extensive investigation. They interviewed hotel staff, guests, and colleagues. Jonathan had no known enemies, no financial troubles, and no history of mental illness. His personal life was stable, yet he was gone without a trace. The strange part? The condensation on the mirror meant the message had been written recently, hours after Jonathan was last seen. But if he was already missing, who wrote it? Detectives combed through Jonathan's recent activities, searching for any indication of trouble. His phone records revealed a series of late-night calls to an unknown number in the days leading up to his disappearance. When authorities traced the number, they were met with another dead end. It was registered to a prepaid burner phone, impossible to track. One detail, however, stood out. A hotel employee, working the night shift, recalled hearing muffled voices coming from room 724 around 3 a.m. When he passed by, everything was silent, but he couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. As the investigation deepened, detectives uncovered an unsettling pattern. 5 years earlier, another guest had vanished from the same hotel room. Same circumstances, same eerie message left behind. That case was never solved either. The previous victim, a travel blogger named Henry Larson, had checked into room 724 on August 18, 2016. He had been seen entering his room that night, but by morning he was gone. His belongings untouched, door locked from the inside, and just like Jonathan, a message written on the mirror. Even more disturbing, Larson had also made several calls to a burner phone before his disappearance. The connections were undeniable, yet no evidence pointed to a suspect. Speculation ran wild. Some believed Jonathan had staged his own disappearance. Others suspected foul play, possibly linked to an underground network of disappearances. But with no evidence, the case grew colder with each passing day. Paranormal theories also began to surface. The Grand Haven Hotel had a long history of strange occurrences, unexplained noises, and eerie apparitions. Some believed room 724 itself was cursed, responsible for the disappearances of its unlucky guests. Then came an even stranger discovery. While searching through archived hotel records, authorities found an old blueprint of the building. There, hidden behind the walls of room 724, was a narrow, concealed passageway leading to an abandoned service stairwell. The passage had been sealed decades ago, or so they thought. Investigators discovered faint scratch marks along the edges of the panel, signs that it had been opened recently. Could someone have used the passage to enter Jonathan's room unseen? Was this how Henry Larson had vanished years before? And most importantly, who was behind it all? To this day, the disappearance of Jonathan Blake remains one of the most baffling unsolved cases. No leads, no suspects, just a locked room, a cryptic message, and a terrifying history. Was he taken? Did he leave willingly? Or did he uncover something that was never meant to be found? Rebecca Holt was a 27-year-old graphic designer living in Chicago. Smart, creative, and full of life, she had no known enemies. But on the night of November 3rd, 2018, something inexplicable happened. Security footage from her apartment building at 11:58 p.m. shows Rebecca entering the lobby, looking over her shoulder as if someone were following her. She steps into the elevator, presses the button for her floor, and then something strange happens. The elevator doors close, but Rebecca never reaches her floor. The elevator arrives at its destination, the doors open, and the cabin is empty. Rebecca is gone. When Rebecca didn't show up for work the next morning, her friends became concerned. Calls went straight to voicemail. Her apartment was locked from the inside, her belongings undisturbed. But Rebecca herself was nowhere to be found. Authorities pored over hours of surveillance footage, but there were no signs of her ever leaving the building. It was as if she had vanished into thin air. Then came the most disturbing discovery yet. While inspecting the elevator system, technicians noticed something unusual. Between the 12th and 14th floors, the elevator briefly stopped. On a floor that did not exist on the building's official blueprints, this hidden level, an unregistered space between floors, was sealed off decades ago during renovations. But the elevator logs confirmed that it had stopped there for exactly 43 seconds the night Rebecca disappeared. Investigators pried open a maintenance hatch and stepped inside. What they found was chilling. The space was filled with old office furniture, scattered papers, and in the center of the room, Rebecca's phone, lying face up, still powered on. With a single missed call from an unknown number. What happened to Rebecca Holt? Some believe she was the victim of foul play, that someone was waiting for her on that hidden floor. Others think she may have stumbled upon something she was never meant to see. And then, there are the theories that defy reality itself. The maintenance workers who first entered the hidden floor reported feeling an overwhelming sense of dread. Some claimed to hear faint whispers in the darkness. Paranormal investigators were later called in, and their equipment picked up inexplicable fluctuations in energy. Was Rebecca taken? Did she uncover a long-forgotten secret? Or did she step into something beyond our understanding? The only certainty is that she was never seen again. Story 4. Some crimes are brutal, some are senseless, and then there are those that seem almost impossible. A case with no clear suspects, no known motive, and only one chilling clue left behind. This is the story of Jonathan Blake, the man who disappeared from a locked hotel room. Jonathan Blake was a 42-year-old financial consultant from Seattle. On March 12, 2021, he checked into the Grand Haven Hotel in San Francisco for a 3-day business trip. By all accounts, it was just another routine stay. Security footage showed him entering his room, number 724, alone at 9:47 p.m. That was the last time he was seen. The next morning, when he failed to show up for his meeting, his colleagues grew concerned. Calls went straight to voicemail. Hotel staff were sent to check on him. But when they reached room 724, they found something that defied explanation. Jonathan's room was locked from the inside. The chain was still latched, the windows sealed shut. His suitcase, laptop, and wallet were undisturbed. But Jonathan himself was gone. There were no signs of struggle, No forced entry. Just a single message written on the bathroom mirror in condensation. "Don't look for me." Police reviewed security footage from the entire floor. No one had entered or exited his room after him. There was no back entrance, no hidden passage. He had simply vanished. Authorities launched an extensive investigation. They interviewed hotel staff, guests, and colleagues. Jonathan had no known enemies, no financial troubles, and no history of mental illness. His personal life was stable, yet he was gone without a trace. The strange part? The condensation on the mirror meant the message had been written recently, hours after Jonathan was last seen. But if he was already missing, who wrote it? Detectives combed through Jonathan's recent activities, searching for any indication of trouble. His phone records revealed a series of late-night calls to an unknown number in the days leading up to his disappearance. When authorities traced the number, they were met with another dead end. It was registered to a prepaid burner phone, impossible to track. One detail, however, stood out. A hotel employee, working the night shift, recalled hearing muffled voices coming from room 724 around 3 a.m. When he passed by, everything was silent, but he couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. As the investigation deepened, detectives uncovered an unsettling pattern. 5 years earlier, another guest had vanished from the same hotel room. Same circumstances, same eerie message left behind. That case was never solved either. The previous victim, a travel blogger named Henry Larson, had checked into room 724 on August 18, 2016. He had been seen entering his room that night, but by morning he was gone. His belongings untouched, door locked from the inside, and just like Jonathan, a message written on the mirror. Even more disturbing, Larson had also made several calls to a burner phone before his disappearance. The connections were undeniable, yet no evidence pointed to a suspect. Speculation ran wild. Some believed Jonathan had staged his own disappearance. Others suspected foul play, possibly linked to an underground network of disappearances. But with no evidence, the case grew colder with each passing day. Paranormal theories also began to surface. The Grand Haven Hotel had a long history of strange occurrences, unexplained noises, and eerie apparitions. Some believed room 724 itself was cursed, responsible for the disappearances of its unlucky guests. Then came an even stranger discovery. While searching through archived hotel records, authorities found an old blueprint of the building. There, hidden behind the walls of room 724, was a narrow, concealed passageway leading to an abandoned service stairwell. The passage had been sealed decades ago, or so they thought. Investigators discovered faint scratch marks along the edges of the panel, signs that it had been opened recently. Could someone have used the passage to enter Jonathan's room unseen? Was this how Henry Larson had vanished years before? And most importantly, who was behind it all? To this day, the disappearance of Jonathan Blake remains one of the most baffling unsolved cases. No leads, no suspects, just a locked room, a cryptic message, and a terrifying history. Was he taken? Did he leave willingly? Or did he uncover something that was never meant to be found? The most unsettling part came when the camera caught something no one expected. Just a few moments after the man left, a second figure appeared. A woman, walking in the same direction as the man, her face obscured by a scarf. She stood at the entrance of Sophie's building for a while before disappearing into the shadows. The footage was grainy, and the images weren't clear enough to identify either person. The mystery deepened. Who were these figures? Why had they been near Sophie's apartment that night? And why didn't anyone hear anything or see them? As investigators dug deeper, they learned something even more troubling. Sophie had recently ended a relationship with her longtime boyfriend, David Green, a local mechanic. The breakup had been mutual, but there were rumors that David had been struggling to accept it. Neighbors described him as appearing distraught after Sophie ended things, though he had always been polite and respectful. David was brought in for questioning, but after a thorough investigation, the police cleared him of any involvement. He had an alibi for the night Sophie disappeared. He had been at home with his sister, and there was no evidence to suggest he had anything to do with Sophie's disappearance. But just when it seemed like the case had gone cold, a chilling twist occurred. 2 weeks after Sophie's disappearance, a mysterious letter arrived at the police station. The envelope was unmarked, with no return address. Inside was a single note, written in handwriting that didn't match Sophie's. The note read, "She's not coming back. You should have listened." Authorities couldn't determine who had sent the letter, but it only added to the growing sense of dread surrounding the case. Was it from the person responsible for Sophie's disappearance? Or was it a sick prank from someone trying to mislead the investigation? Several more weeks passed, and the investigation into Sophie's case went nowhere. The footage of the two mysterious figures and the cryptic letter were the only clues left. But the deeper they searched, the more questions arose. Sophie's apartment showed no signs of a struggle, and no one reported hearing anything unusual. Yet, the presence of the two figures near her apartment suggested that someone had been watching her, waiting for the right moment to act. As the months wore on, Sophie's family never gave up hope, even as the case began to grow colder. They held vigils, handed out flyers, and even started a social media campaign to keep her name in the public eye. But despite their efforts, no one came forward with new information. Was Sophie the victim of a stalker? Did the mysterious figures know her? Or was this a case of a random abduction? No one could say for sure, and the town of Maple Ridge remained in a state of fear and confusion. Today, Sophie Carter's case remains unsolved. Her family and friends continue to search for answers, desperate to know what happened to her. The haunting question still lingers. Who took Sophie, and why? Story 8. Tonight, we dive into a story that remains unsolved, a case that continues to haunt the small town of Westbrook, Oregon. This is the eerie story of the murder of Natalie West. Natalie West was a 29-year-old investigative journalist who had recently moved back to her hometown of Westbrook. After years of working at a major news outlet in the city, Natalie decided to leave her fast-paced life behind and return to her roots. She had grown up in Westbrook, and despite the quiet, rural setting, she had always been drawn to the place. She was an independent woman, fiercely dedicated to uncovering the truth and always seeking out the hidden stories. In the weeks leading up to her return, Natalie had been working on a new project, one that she kept very close to her chest. She'd been investigating a series of mysterious disappearances in the area that had been occurring over the past decade. Several locals had gone missing, and although the cases were never solved, many suspected foul play. Natalie was determined to uncover what happened to these missing people and bring the truth to light. But on the evening of June 3, 2016, everything changed. Natalie's sister, Rachel, had been trying to reach her all day, but Natalie's phone went straight to voicemail. Rachel wasn't too concerned at first. After all, Natalie was often busy with her work. But as the hours passed and she still hadn't heard from her, Rachel decided to check in on her. When she arrived at Natalie's house around 9 p.m., the door was unlocked. Rachel stepped inside, calling for her sister. There was no response. Rachel quickly noticed something was off. Natalie's belongings were scattered around the house. Her laptop was open on the kitchen table, papers were strewn across the living room floor, and her car was parked outside. But Natalie was nowhere to be found. Fearing the worst, Rachel called the police. Officers arrived at the scene and conducted an immediate search of the property. There were no signs of forced entry, and nothing appeared to be stolen. The search expanded to the woods surrounding Natalie's home, as her house was located near a dense forest area. But as hours turned into days, there was no sign of Natalie. The case began to gain local attention, but as the investigation unfolded, the mystery only deepened. A few days later, a breakthrough came when a hiker reported finding a torn piece of paper in the woods. The paper was a note, written in Natalie's handwriting. It read, "They know I'm close. Don't trust anyone." The note was disturbing for several reasons. First, it was clear that Natalie had been in a state of distress, and she had written it shortly before her disappearance. But the message, "Don't trust anyone," was cryptic and vague. Was she referring to someone in particular? Who was she trying to protect herself from? And what had she discovered? The discovery of the note raised even more questions. Natalie's investigation had been centered around the missing persons cases in the area. Did her work lead her to uncover something dangerous? Did she stumble upon a dark secret that someone wanted to keep hidden? As police continued their search, another chilling clue emerged. A local convenience store had security footage from the night of Natalie's disappearance. The video showed Natalie entering the store around 8:30 p.m., just an hour before she was last seen. She was buying some supplies, looking calm and collected, but there was one detail that caught investigators' attention. When she left the store, a man seemed to follow her out. He appeared out of nowhere, walking a few steps behind her. He wasn't wearing anything distinctive, but his behavior was odd. He seemed to be deliberately keeping his distance, yet keeping her in his sight. The man was never identified, and the video footage wasn't enough to pin anything on him. But the eerie presence of the figure made it clear that someone had been following Natalie and possibly watching her every move. Days turned into weeks, and despite exhaustive searches, there was still no sign of Natalie. The case grew cold, but the mystery continued to linger in the air. Was Natalie kidnapped? Did she run into danger because of her investigation? Or had she uncovered something so sinister that it cost her life? Then, nearly a year later, an unsettling turn occurred. A man named Michael Larson, a local who had been a friend of Natalie's, came forward with new information. Michael had always been a quiet, somewhat reclusive figure in the community. He was known to be friendly with Natalie, but never seemed to fit in with the rest of the locals. According to Michael, he had been one of the last people to see Natalie the night she disappeared. He claimed that she had stopped by his house earlier in the evening to discuss her findings on the missing persons cases. Michael told investigators that Natalie was afraid, that she had uncovered something that made her believe her life was in danger. She mentioned that someone close to her might be involved, but she refused to elaborate further. Natalie allegedly said, "They'll try to silence me, but I won't stop." After that, Michael claimed he didn't see Natalie again until after she had gone missing. However, when police checked his story, they found a number of inconsistencies. Michael's alibi was shaky, and there were rumors that he had been involved in shady dealings in the past. Could he have been involved in Natalie's disappearance? Had she uncovered a truth that hit too close to home for him? The case of Natalie West's disappearance remains unsolved, and the town of Westbrook is still haunted by the mystery. Did Natalie uncover something so dangerous that it cost her life? Who was the man following her the night she disappeared? And what did she know that made her so afraid? The truth remains out there, hidden in the shadows of the small town. Natalie's family still hopes for answers, and the case remains open, though investigators have made little progress. Story 9. Today, we're going to discuss a case that has left many with more questions than answers, and it's one that has remained unsolved for over 15 years. This is the story of the vanishing of Sarah Davis. Sarah Davis was a 27-year-old woman living in the coastal town of Seaview, California. Seaview was a charming town, known for its picturesque views, its bustling little beach, and its close-knit community. Sarah had lived there for most of her life, and although she wasn't well known in the town, she was a familiar face. She worked as a waitress at a small, family-owned cafe, and everyone who knew her described her as warm-hearted, friendly, and always eager to help. On the evening of March 12, 2009, Sarah finished her shift at the cafe around 10 p.m. It was a routine night, nothing out of the ordinary. She said goodbye to her coworkers and walked out into the cool, crisp night. She texted her mother, telling her she was on her way home and that she'd be there in 20 minutes. But Sarah never made it back. The next morning, when Sarah's mother, Janet, noticed her daughter hadn't come home, she was immediately concerned. Sarah had never stayed out late without letting her know, and this sudden disappearance was completely out of character. Janet immediately called the police. A search was launched, but Sarah was nowhere to be found. Her car, a blue Honda Civic, was found parked just a few blocks from her home, near an old, abandoned pier by the beach. But there was no sign of Sarah anywhere. Her belongings, her purse, wallet, and phone were missing, and the area around her car was eerily quiet. The police canvassed the area, but no one had seen or heard anything unusual the night before. At first, investigators thought Sarah might have been a victim of foul play, but as they combed through her personal life, they found no obvious connections to anyone who might have wanted to harm her. There were no signs of a struggle, and no one from her past seemed to have a motive. Then a breakthrough came. A local security camera, situated near the pier where Sarah's car was found, showed a woman who appeared to be Sarah, walking alone along the beach late that night. The footage was grainy, but it was clear that the woman was alone. She seemed to be walking with purpose, as if heading towards something or someone. The footage was time-stamped at 10:30 p.m., just 30 minutes after Sarah had last contacted her mother. But here's where the case takes a strange turn. As Sarah walked along the beach, the camera captured a shadowy figure approaching her from behind. The figure was tall and wearing a dark jacket, but they kept their distance, staying several feet away from her. The camera only captured brief glimpses of them before they disappeared into the darkness. But what was unsettling was the figure's behavior. They never seemed to get closer to Sarah, and after a few moments, both Sarah and the figure vanished from the camera's view. The footage was puzzling. Was this person following Sarah? Or did they know her? Or was it just someone out for a late walk who happened to cross her path? The police pursued this lead but were unable to identify the figure. They interviewed local residents, including some who lived near the beach, but no one recalled seeing anything suspicious that night. It was as if Sarah had vanished into thin air. Then, just as investigators thought they were hitting a dead end, a chilling discovery was made. A few days after Sarah's disappearance, a woman named Marissa Collins came forward with information. Marissa was a local artist who lived near the pier and had seen Sarah around town on several occasions. She told police that, a few days before Sarah went missing, she had seen Sarah speaking with a man at the cafe where she worked. Marissa didn't know the man, but she said he had a peculiar presence, as if he was trying to stay under the radar. He was described as being in his early 40s, with dark hair and a rugged appearance. Marissa didn't think much of it at the time, but after hearing about Sarah's disappearance, she remembered the interaction. She said that the man had been acting strange, almost as if he was watching Sarah from a distance. Marissa didn't think it was anything sinister at first, but now, looking back, she felt uneasy about the encounter. Detectives investigated the man, whose name was Frank Edwards. He was a transient who had recently arrived in Seaview and had no known ties to the area. Frank had been living in a rundown motel a few blocks from the cafe where Sarah worked. When police interviewed him, he claimed he had never spoken to Sarah and had no idea who she was. However, his alibi for the night of Sarah's disappearance was shaky at best. Frank said he had been staying in his motel room, but no one could corroborate his story. His room didn't have any signs of him having been there all night, and the motel's security cameras had malfunctioned that evening, making it impossible to verify his movements. Despite the suspicious circumstances surrounding Frank, there was no concrete evidence linking him to Sarah's disappearance. He was considered a person of interest, but without solid proof, he was released. The case continued to grow colder as weeks turned into months. No new leads surfaced, and the townspeople of Seaview became increasingly uneasy. They couldn't stop wondering, had Sarah been a victim of a random crime, or was she taken by someone she knew? Sarah's family never gave up hope, but after years of searching, they were no closer to finding answers. The disappearance of Sarah Davis remains one of the most mysterious cases in Seaview, with many wondering if she was the victim of a stalker, someone who had been quietly watching her, or if her disappearance was the result of something more sinister. To this day, the case remains unsolved, and Sarah's family continues to hold on to the hope that one day, the truth will come to light. Story 10. Tonight, we have a case that has baffled investigators for over 20 years and continues to haunt a small community. This is the story of the disappearance of Emma Collins. It was a quiet evening in the fall of 2003 when 22-year-old Emma Collins went missing without a trace. Emma was a bright, outgoing woman who had just graduated from college with a degree in psychology. She had dreams of working with troubled youth and making a real difference in the world. After graduation, she returned to her hometown of Ridgewood, a sleepy town nestled in the rolling hills of New Hampshire. Emma moved back into her childhood home and quickly became involved in local charities, volunteering at the community center and attending church. She had a close-knit group of friends, but she was known to be independent and loved her solitude. Emma enjoyed hiking in the nearby woods and often spent time on the trails, walking alone to clear her mind. On the night of November 14, 2003, Emma had dinner with a close friend, Megan, at a local diner. The two women chatted for hours, laughing and reminiscing about their college days. As the night drew to a close, Emma told Megan that she was planning to go for a late-night hike to one of her favorite spots in the woods, the Old Mill Trail. It was a peaceful, secluded area, and Emma had often hiked there to unwind. Emma's last words to Megan were, "I just need some quiet time, but I'll be home soon." That was the last anyone heard from Emma. The next morning, when Emma failed to show up for work at the local community center, her parents grew worried. It wasn't like Emma to just vanish without a word. Her mother, Carla, immediately drove to Emma's house, but when she arrived, there was no sign of her daughter. Emma's car was parked outside, her purse was still on the kitchen table, and her phone was missing. The family called the police, and an immediate search was launched. Officers scoured the woods, the town, and the surrounding areas, but there was no sign of Emma. Her friends, family, and even strangers volunteered in the search, posting flyers, organizing search parties, and canvassing every inch of Ridgewood. But it was as if Emma had simply disappeared. Days turned into weeks, and there were no leads, but a breakthrough came when a pair of hikers stumbled upon a strange discovery in the woods. On December 2nd, when Sarah's mother, 3 weeks after Emma's disappearance, noticed her daughter hadn't found Emma's backpack, she was immediately Mill Trail. Sarah had never stayed out late without letting her plan to hike that night. And this sudden disappearance was completely out of character. With her water bottle, Janet immediately called the police, and a few personal items inside. The most chilling part of the discovery was that Emma's phone was inside a blue Honda Civic, but it had been shattered into pieces blocks from her home, as if someone had deliberately destroyed it. Abandoned pier by the discovery of the backpack, but there was no sign of the mystery anywhere. If Emma had been hiking that night, her purse, why had she left her belongings behind? And the area around her car was eerily quiet. And more importantly, the police canvassed the area, why was the phone damaged? But no one had seen or heard anything unusual the police began to investigate the area more thoroughly. And they soon uncovered something. Investigators thought Sarah might have been a victim of foul footage from a nearby gas station showed Emma's car pulling into the parking lot. They found no obvious connections to anyone who might have wanted to harm her. After her dinner with Megan, there were no signs of a struggle. But in the footage, and Emma wasn't driving the car. Seemed to have a motive. There was someone else behind the wheel. Came. The footage was grainy, security camera, but the person in the driver's seat where Sarah's car was found. He was wearing a hoodie and sunglasses, making it impossible to get a clear look at his face. The footage was Emma's car remained at the gas station for about 15 minutes before driving off. She seemed to be walking with heading in the direction as if heading towards something. The footage raised several questions. The footage was time-stamped at 10:30 p.m. Who was the man driving Emma's car? Just 30 minutes after Emma willingly gotten into the car with him. But here's where the case takes a strange turn. As the investigation continued, walked along the beach, more unsettling the camera captured a shadowy figure approaching her from behind. In the weeks leading up to Emma's wearing a dark jacket, she had been receiving strange messages, staying several feet away from her. Some phone calls. The camera only captured brief glimpses of them. Emma had never mentioned it to her family or friends. But Megan later revealed that Emma had confided in her about the unsettling messages. They never seemed to get closer to Sarah. The messages were vague and cryptic. But they all seemed to follow a similar pattern. The camera's view. I know what you're doing. Was puzzling. You can't run. Was this person following Sarah? You're not safe. Or did Emma they know brushed it off at the time? Or was it just someone out thinking it was just some random happened to cross her path? But now, with her disappearance, this lead, those words were unable to identify the figure. Who had interviewed local residents, and why hadn't Emma told anyone about the growing sense of fear she had been feeling? Anything suspicious. A few weeks later, it was another break in the case vanished when a local man named Todd Daniels was brought in. Investigators thought they were hitting a dead end. 35-year-old chilling discovery was made on the outskirts. A few days after Sarah's disappearance, he had a criminal history. A woman named including a few minor offenses and a previous charge of harassment. Marissa was a local Todd had been seen near the Mill Trail and had seen Sarah around town on several occasions. And he had a history of making strange, police that unsettling comments to some of the local women. When the police questioned him, speaking with a man Todd at the cafe became increasingly defensive. Marissa didn't know the man. He claimed that he had been home that night. but his alibi was trying to stay under the radar. And there were no witnesses. He was described as being in his early 40s. Todd was eventually arrested with dark hair and a rugged suspicion of kidnapping. Marissa didn't think much of it at the time, despite the circumstantial evidence. But after hearing about Sarah's disappearance, they were never able to charge him. She remembered the interaction. There was no physical evidence linking him to the crime, almost as if he was watching Sarah from a distance. As the years went by, Marissa didn't think it was anything sinister at first. Remained cold. But now, despite the theories, the police never found any solid leads or answers. Detectives investigated the victim of a stalker whose name was Frank Edwards. Did Todd Daniels know more than he was a transient who had recently arrived in Seaview, or was there another dark force and had no known in the shadows of Ridgewood? Frank had been living in a rundown motel a few blocks from the cafe where Sarah her family continues to search for answers. He claimed he had never spoken to Sarah, has never stopped no idea who she someone knows the truth. However, and she continues to spread awareness about her daughter's case in the hopes of finally bringing closure. Frank said he had been staying in his motel room tonight, but no one could corroborate his story. Investigators his room didn't have any signs of him and continues to haunt a small community. And the motel security cameras had malfunctioned that evening of Emma Collins, making it impossible. It was a quiet evening in the fall of 2003 when 22-year-old surrounding Frank went missing without a trace. There was no concrete evidence linking him to Sarah's outgoing woman who had just graduated from college with a degree without solid proof. She had dreams of working with troubled youth to grow colder as weeks turned into months. After graduation, no new leads surfaced. She returned to her hometown, and the townspeople of Seaview became increasingly uneasy. In the rolling hills they couldn't stop wondering. Emma moved back into her childhood home and quickly became involved by local charities. Sarah's family never gave up hope. And after years of searching, she had a close-knit group closer to finding answers. But she was known to be independent. Of Sarah Davis remains one of the most mysterious. Emma enjoyed hiking in the nearby woods, with many wondering if she was the victim of a stalker, walking alone, someone who had been quietly watching her. On the night of November 14th, 2003, of something more Emma had dinner with a close friend. The case remains at a local diner. And the two women chatted for hours, to hold on to the laughing and reminiscing about their college days. Come to light. As the night drew to a close, tonight, Emma told Megan that she was planning to go for a late-night hike over to one of her favorite spots and continues to haunt the old mill trail. This was a peaceful story of the secluded area of Emma Collins, and Emma had often hiked there to unwind. It was a quiet evening in the fall of 2003. Emma's last words when 22-year-old Emma Collins, I just need some quiet time without a trace. But I'll be home soon. Emma was a bright, that was the last woman who had just graduated from college the next morning, with a degree in psychology. When Emma failed to show up she had dreams of working with troubled youth and making a real difference in the world. It wasn't like after Emma graduation just vanish without a word. She returned to her hometown. Her mother, Ridgewood, Carla, immediately drove to Emma's in the rolling hills of New Hampshire. But when she arrived, Emma moved back into her childhood home and quickly became involved in local charities. Her purse was volunteering at the community center, and her phone was missing. She had a close-knit group of friends, and an immediate she was known to be independent and officers scoured the woods. Emma enjoyed hiking in the surrounding areas and often spent time on the trails. But there was no sign of Emma walking alone to clear her mind. Family, on the night of strangers volunteered in the 2003, posting Emma flyers, had dinner with a organizing search parties, Megan at a local canvassing diner. Every inch of Ridgewood. Two women chatted for hours, but it was as if Emma laughing and reminiscing about their college days turned into weeks. As the night drew to a close, Emma told Megan that she was planning to go for a late-night hike to one of her favorite spots in the woods. On December 2nd, the Old Mill Trail, almost 3 weeks after Emma's disappearance, secluded area, two hikers and Emma had often hiked there near the edge of the Mill Trail. Emma's last just a few hundred yards from the spot where she had planned to hike that night. But I'll be home soon. The backpack was intact. That was the last water bottle anyone heard from Emma. A notebook. The next morning, a few personal items Emma failed to show up for work. The most chilling part of the discovery was that Emma's phone was inside the backpack. It wasn't like Emma had shattered into pieces without a word, as if someone had deliberately destroyed it. Immediately drove to Emma's house. The backpack only but when she arrived, there was no Emma had been hiking that night. Emma's car was parked outside. Why had she left her belongings behind? Her purse was still on the kitchen table. Why hadn't she taken her phone with her? And her phone was more importantly, the family called the police. The police began to investigate the area more thoroughly. Officers scoured the woods, soon uncovered the town even more disturbing. And the surrounding areas. Security footage from a nearby gas station showed Emma's car pulling into the parking lot, and even strangers volunteered in the search. Just minutes after her dinner with organizing search parties. But in the footage, Emma wasn't driving every inch of Ridgewood. There was someone else behind the wheel. Emma had simply disappeared. The footage was grainy. Days turned into weeks. The person in the driver's seat appeared to be a man. But a breakthrough came he was wearing a hoodie and stumbled upon a strange discovery, making it impossible to get a clear look at his face. Emma's car remained at the gas station for about 15 minutes before driving off, heading in the direction of the Mill Trail. The footage raised several questions. Who was the man driving Emma's car? Had Emma willingly gotten into the car with him? Or had she been forced? As the investigation continued, more unsettling details came to light. Police learned that, in the weeks leading up to Emma's disappearance, she had been receiving strange messages, some texts, some phone calls, from an unknown number. Emma had never mentioned it to her family or friends, but Megan later revealed that Emma had confided in her about the unsettling messages. The messages were vague and cryptic, but they all seemed to follow a similar pattern. "I know what you're doing. You can't run forever. You're not safe." Emma had brushed it off at the time, thinking it was just some random prank. But now, with her disappearance, those words took on a far more sinister meaning. Who had been sending them? And why hadn't Emma told anyone about the growing sense of fear she had been feeling? A few weeks later, another break in the case came when a local man named Todd Daniels was brought in for questioning. Todd was a 35-year-old recluse who lived on the outskirts of Ridgewood. He had a criminal history, including a few minor offenses and a previous charge of harassment. Todd had been seen near the Mill Trail on the night Emma disappeared, and he had a history of making strange, unsettling comments to some of the local women. When the police questioned him, Todd became increasingly defensive and agitated. He claimed that he had been home that night, but his alibi was weak, and there were no witnesses to confirm his story. Todd was eventually arrested and charged with suspicion of kidnapping and assault, but despite the circumstantial evidence, they were never able to charge him with Emma's disappearance. There was no physical evidence linking him to the crime, and no body was ever found. As the years went by, the case of Emma Collins remained cold. Despite the theories, the police never found any solid leads or answers. Was Emma the victim of a stalker? Did Todd Daniels know more than he was letting on? Or was there another dark force lurking in the shadows of Ridgewood? To this day, Emma's disappearance remains unsolved, and her family continues to search for answers. Her mother, Carla, has never stopped believing that someone knows the truth, and she continues to spread awareness about her daughter's case in the hopes of finally bringing closure. Today, we delve into a case that shocked a quiet suburban neighborhood, and its mystery has never been solved. This is the disturbing story of the murder of Olivia Harper. Olivia Harper was a 34-year-old schoolteacher living in the affluent neighborhood of Silver Pines, a community known for its picturesque streets, well-manicured lawns, and tight-knit families. Olivia had moved to Silver Pines a few years prior to the incident. She had built a life for herself there after leaving behind a turbulent past. Olivia was known for her kindness, dedication to her students, and her unwavering optimism. She had recently started dating a local doctor, Mark Stevens, and everyone around her thought that her life was finally on the right track. But all of that would change on the evening of July 15, 2012. It was a regular summer evening when Olivia's neighbors became concerned. They hadn't seen her leave the house all day, and it was unusual for her to stay inside on such a beautiful afternoon. A neighbor named Lisa, who had been close to Olivia, decided to check on her. Lisa knocked on Olivia's front door but received no answer. Growing worried, she called Olivia's phone. No answer. Finally, with a feeling of dread settling in her stomach, Lisa called the police. When officers arrived, they found the front door of Olivia's house unlocked. Inside, they discovered a horrifying scene. Olivia's body was lying in the living room, blood pooling around her. She had been stabbed multiple times, and there were signs of a violent struggle. There was no sign of forced entry, no robbery, and nothing was out of place. It was clear that Olivia had known her attacker. There were no signs of a break-in, and nothing appeared to have been stolen. The police immediately launched an investigation, but as they examined the scene, there were strange clues that didn't seem to add up. First, there was a strange, handwritten note found near Olivia's body. The note was simple, written hastily in black ink, and it read, "You should have left town." The message was cryptic and left investigators wondering, who would want to harm Olivia, and why? Had she been involved in something dangerous? The idea that someone had targeted her specifically made the case all the more chilling. The police began their investigation by looking into Olivia's relationships. Her boyfriend, Mark Stevens, was immediately questioned. He seemed distraught when he arrived at the scene, claiming that he had no idea what had happened. He told investigators that he had been working late at the hospital and had not seen Olivia for 2 days prior to her death. His alibi checked out, but there was something about his reaction that struck the detectives as odd. He seemed too composed, too calm in the face of such a tragedy. After several rounds of questioning, Mark became the prime suspect. He had been Olivia's boyfriend for only 6 months, but they had been incredibly close. However, there was no evidence to suggest that Mark had any motive to hurt her. He was well liked in the community and had a reputation as a caring, compassionate doctor. But Olivia's family insisted that their daughter had never shown signs of fear or distress in their relationship. The couple had been happy, and Olivia had even confided in her parents about her future with Mark. Detectives also turned their attention to Olivia's past. They learned that she had been in an abusive relationship years earlier, one that she had worked hard to move on from. Her ex, Robert Calloway, was known to have a violent temper, and he had made threatening remarks to Olivia in the past. Robert had even been arrested a few years ago for stalking her, but after completing a court-ordered therapy program, he had disappeared from Olivia's life. Had Robert somehow resurfaced? After digging deeper into Robert's whereabouts, the police discovered that he had been living just a few miles from Olivia's house. He had been keeping a low profile and had no known connections to Silver Pines, but investigators were suspicious. They brought Robert in for questioning, but when they interviewed him, he denied any involvement in Olivia's murder. He seemed genuinely shocked and even offered to provide an alibi for the night of the killing, claiming he had been at home alone. There was no concrete evidence linking Robert to the crime, but the detectives couldn't rule him out either. Months passed and the case grew cold. There were no new leads, no breakthrough pieces of evidence. But the most chilling twist came when a new witness came forward in early 2013. A delivery driver named Daniel Jenkins reported seeing a man leaving Olivia's house late on the night of her murder. Daniel had been delivering a package to a neighbor when he noticed a figure exiting Olivia's front door around 11 p.m. The figure was wearing a dark jacket and had his head lowered, as if trying to avoid being seen. Daniel didn't recognize the man, but the description he gave seemed to match someone from the neighborhood. A man named Richard Foster, a recent divorcee who had recently moved in next door to Olivia. Richard Foster was brought in for questioning. He claimed that he had been at home that night, alone, but his alibi was shaky. Neighbors reported that Richard had been acting strangely in the days leading up to Olivia's murder, and some even claimed they had seen him staring at her house late at night. But when the police investigated his background, they found no prior criminal record or history of violence. In the end, despite the promising leads, Richard was never formally charged, and the case went cold. The note found near Olivia's body remained a key piece of evidence, but no one could decipher its meaning. Was Olivia the victim of a random attack, or was she targeted by someone from her past? Was Mark Stevens involved, or was he simply a man caught up in a tragedy that he didn't deserve? The case of Olivia Harper's murder remains unsolved to this day, and Silver Pines continues to be haunted by the questions that linger. Who killed Olivia and why? And who left that cryptic note? The answers remain elusive, buried deep beneath the surface of a seemingly perfect suburban town. Story 12. Today, we're diving into a mysterious case that has plagued a small town for decades, leaving its residents with a sense of unease and an unsolved question hanging over them. This is the story of the disappearance of Carla Henderson. Carla Henderson was a 28-year-old woman living in the quiet town of Pine Hill, Arkansas, a place where everyone knew everyone and secrets were hard to keep. Pine Hill had the charm of a typical rural town, with its dirt roads, small-town cafes, and local diners where neighbors would gather and gossip. Carla had grown up here, and after leaving for college, she returned to start her career as a local librarian. She was intelligent, friendly, and loved to read, always carrying a book with her wherever she went. On the morning of November 7th, 1999, Carla kissed her parents goodbye, as she did every morning, before leaving her home for work. That day, she had an early meeting with the town's historical society, where she was working on an archival project. Carla's parents, James and Ellen Henderson, were used to their daughter's routine, and nothing about that morning seemed out of the ordinary. However, By the time Carla's shift was supposed to end at 5 p.m., she still hadn't returned home. This wasn't like Carla. She was always punctual. Her parents began calling her, but there was no answer. After a few more attempts, they started to feel the familiar pang of concern. They called a few of Carla's friends and coworkers, but no one had seen her since the meeting earlier that afternoon. After a few hours, her parents decided to report her missing to the local police. The entire town rallied together to search for Carla. Friends, family, and even strangers joined in, but there was no trace of her anywhere. Her car, a red Toyota Corolla, was found parked in the library's lot, but there was no sign of Carla. It was as though she had simply vanished. The police began their investigation, speaking to everyone who had seen Carla that day. The librarian's colleagues recalled that she had left work for the meeting but didn't mention anything unusual. No one had seen her after that. Carla's car was found in the same parking spot where she had left it in the morning, and the library had no security cameras to review. A few days into the search, police discovered something strange. A witness came forward with information about a man who had been seen lingering around the library the day Carla disappeared. This man, a drifter who had recently come to Pine Hill, was seen in the vicinity of the library during the time Carla would have been leaving. He had no known address, no friends or family in town, and seemed to be passing through. His name was Thomas Burke. Thomas had been in and out of trouble with the law in other states, mostly for minor offenses, but he had never been arrested for anything serious. When the police questioned him, he claimed that he had been walking around town, trying to find work, and had simply been passing through the library's parking lot when he noticed Carla. He said he had no idea what happened to her, and after a brief interview, the police let him go. However, his behavior was strange. He appeared to be nervous, and his answers seemed rehearsed. The investigation continued for months, but nothing concrete surfaced. The police even searched the nearby woods and rural areas around Pine Hill, but no clues were found. The only lead they had was Thomas Burke. But despite his suspicious behavior, there was no evidence linking him to Carla's disappearance. Then, in the summer of 2000, nearly a year after Carla vanished, a shocking discovery was made. A group of teenagers, hiking in a remote area near the outskirts of Pine Hill, stumbled upon a small, abandoned shack in the woods. Inside, they found a collection of strange, disturbing items. Among them were old newspaper clippings about Carla Henderson's disappearance, several books that Carla had checked out from the library, and a map with marked locations, one of which was Pine Hill. The police were called to the scene, and the shack was carefully examined. It appeared that someone had been living there for some time, though no one had been inside when the shack was searched. The items found in the shack seemed to point to someone with an obsession with Carla. The presence of her library books and the marked map raised more questions than answers. Was it possible that Carla had been taken and kept in this shack by someone close to her? The police once again turned their attention to Thomas Burke. They searched his whereabouts and found that, shortly after Carla's disappearance, he had left Pine Hill without a trace. No one knew where he had gone, and he hadn't been seen or heard from since. His mysterious departure and the items found in the shack seemed too coincidental to ignore. But again, there was no direct evidence tying him to Carla's disappearance, and without proof, the case grew colder. Years passed, and the people of Pine Hill were left with an unsettling feeling. Carla had vanished, and no one could explain why or how. The case went unsolved, and the town tried to move on, but it wasn't easy. The discovery of the shack had led to more questions than answers, and many residents wondered if Carla was still out there, waiting to be found. In 2010, a letter arrived at Carla's parents' home, postmarked from a nearby city. The letter was typed with no return address and simply read, "You'll never find her. She's gone for good." That letter added another layer of mystery to an already perplexing case. Who had sent it? Was it someone who knew what happened to Carla? Or was it just a cruel prank? To this day, Carla Henderson's disappearance remains unsolved, and Pine Hill remains a town forever marked by the mystery. Was Thomas Burke involved in her disappearance? Or was he just an unfortunate figure who had been in the wrong place at the wrong time? Did Carla fall victim to something more sinister, someone close to her, Or was she simply a target of a random act of violence? No one knows, and the answers remain locked away. If you have any thoughts or theories about the case of Carla Henderson, we'd love to hear them in the comments. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more unsettling true crime stories. Story 13. Tonight, we're delving into a case that has left a community forever scarred and puzzled. This is the unsettling story of the vanishing of Nora Morgan. Nora Morgan was a 26-year-old young woman who lived in the bustling city of Indianapolis, Indiana. She had always been a bit of an introvert, preferring the calm of her home and the company of a few close friends rather than the social scene. She worked as a graphic designer for a local advertising agency and had recently moved into her first apartment in a quiet neighborhood on the city's south side. Her life, although simple, was filled with promise. She was on the brink of a promotion at work and had recently started seeing a man named Ethan, who she described as the one, but all that changed on the evening of May 4th, 2015. Nora had been spending the evening with Ethan at a small cafe, sipping on coffee and talking about their plans for the future. As the evening wound down, Nora texted her best friend, Rachel, to let her know she was heading home. Nora lived alone, and she liked to be home early, where she could unwind and relax after a long day. She told Rachel she'd call her the next day to chat. However, Nora never called. She never made it home. The following morning, Nora's mother, Lisa, grew concerned. She hadn't heard from her daughter and tried calling her several times, but there was no answer. When Nora didn't respond to any of her texts or calls, Lisa went to her daughter's apartment. The door was locked, and there was no sign of forced entry. Nora's car was still parked outside, but Nora was nowhere to be found. Lisa called the police, and soon an investigation was underway. The police discovered that Nora had last been seen leaving the cafe around 10:15 p.m. Her phone, which had been active until just after midnight, was then suddenly turned off. The last activity on her phone was a text to Rachel saying, "I'm almost home." Despite the police's efforts to track Nora's phone, they couldn't find any clear leads. There were no security cameras in the area near her apartment, and no one had seen Nora after she left the cafe. It was as if she had vanished into thin air. Then came a strange and unsettling development. A week after Nora disappeared, a pair of hikers found her purse in a wooded area on the outskirts of the city. The purse contained Nora's ID, her credit cards, and a set of keys. However, there was no sign of Nora herself. The discovery of the purse raised even more questions. Had Nora been in the woods? Why had she gone there, and why had she left her belongings behind? The police began searching the area near where the purse was found, hoping to uncover new evidence. In a nearby abandoned building, they discovered something that would change the course of the investigation. A set of bloodstains was found on the floor, along with a single abandoned shoe. The blood was confirmed to be Nora's, but there was no sign of her body. The discovery of the blood prompted police to widen their search, but they still had no idea what had happened to Nora. Was she kidnapped? Was she murdered? Or was there something more sinister at play? As the investigation continued, the police began to focus on Nora's relationships. Ethan, her boyfriend, was one of the first people they questioned. He appeared genuinely distraught over her disappearance and cooperated fully with the investigation. Ethan told the police that he had last seen Nora at the cafe, and after they parted ways, he went home and went to bed. But his alibi was weak. No one could confirm his whereabouts after he left Nora that night. It wasn't until several weeks later that the police received a tip that would lead them to their first real breakthrough in the case. A woman named Rachel Ford, who had been living in the same neighborhood as Nora, came forward with a startling revelation. Rachel had been walking her dog near the area where Nora's purse had been found and claimed to have seen someone on the night of Nora's disappearance. She described a man, around 6 feet tall with dark hair, wearing a hooded jacket. The man had been acting strangely, and when Rachel had passed him, he had seemed to be watching her intently. At the time, Rachel didn't think much of it, but after hearing about Nora's disappearance, she realized the man she had seen looked eerily similar to Ethan, Nora's boyfriend. Rachel's statement sent shockwaves through the investigation. The police quickly brought Ethan back in for questioning. This time, his answers seemed more evasive, and he began to act nervous. When pressed, he admitted that he and Nora had argued the night of her disappearance. He claimed that the argument was over something trivial, but investigators couldn't ignore the fact that Ethan's story didn't add up. The police dug deeper into Ethan's past and discovered troubling details. Ethan had a history of controlling behavior in past relationships, and several women had reported that he was possessive and manipulative. Investigators also learned that Ethan had been acting strangely in the days following Nora's disappearance. He had sold some of her personal belongings and even canceled their upcoming plans without explanation. Finally, after weeks of mounting pressure, Ethan was arrested and charged with the kidnapping and murder of Nora Morgan. During the trial, the prosecution revealed that Ethan had lured Nora to a remote area that night, where he attacked her, likely in a fit of jealousy and rage. They argued that he had staged the scene to make it look like Nora had run away, but the evidence pointed to a much darker reality. In a shocking twist, a piece of evidence that had been overlooked for months, Nora's phone, was recovered from a nearby creek. The phone had been smashed, but investigators managed to retrieve crucial data. The last call Nora had received was from Ethan, just minutes before her phone was turned off. This evidence sealed Ethan's fate. Ethan was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The jury found him guilty of not only taking Nora's life, but of betraying her trust in the most horrific way possible. Though Nora's body was never found, the conviction brought a sense of closure to her family and friends. They still honor her memory, keeping the hope alive that one day, they will be able to lay her to rest properly. The case of Nora Morgan's disappearance is a reminder of how deeply betrayal can cut and how sometimes those closest to us are the ones capable of the most horrifying acts. Story 14. Tonight's case will take you to a quiet coastal town in Maine, where a seemingly ordinary woman vanished without a trace. This is the unsettling story of the disappearance of Jessica Mallory. Jessica Mallory was a 32-year-old woman living in the picturesque town of Eastport, Maine, a small fishing village known for its serene landscapes and tight-knit community. Jessica had lived in Eastport her entire life. She was known for her radiant smile, her love for nature, and her quiet yet captivating personality. She worked as a waitress at the local diner, where she was beloved by the townsfolk. Life seemed peaceful, and many thought Jessica had everything going for her, until the evening of April 18, 2007. On that day, Jessica was seen leaving her shift at the diner around 9 p.m. She told her coworkers that she had plans to meet a friend for a late-night walk by the water. Nothing seemed unusual. Jessica was known to enjoy these solitary walks to clear her head after a busy day. The town of Eastport, despite its beauty, had been experiencing a quiet tension due to a series of local disputes over land ownership and fishing rights, but no one thought anything of it. However, when Jessica didn't return home that night, her family grew concerned. She had always kept in touch with her mother, Carol, and her absence was out of character. By morning, Jessica's mother called the police, and a search was quickly initiated. The initial search turned up nothing. Jessica's car was parked in its usual spot outside her apartment, and there were no signs of a struggle. The police checked the walking trails by the water, but again, there was no sign of Jessica. However, investigators did discover something curious: a set of footprints leading from the shore toward a nearby wooded area. These footprints seemed to indicate that Jessica had walked away from the water's edge, but they stopped abruptly, as though she had been picked up or had disappeared into thin air. As days passed with no leads, the case grew more mysterious. Jessica's family was devastated, and the town of Eastport, once known for its tranquility, was now overshadowed by the search for their missing neighbor. Police interviewed friends, family, and locals, but no one could offer any useful information. Jessica had no known enemies, and no one could think of a reason why she would disappear voluntarily. Then, a breakthrough came, though not in the way anyone had hoped. 2 weeks into the search, a local fisherman, Tom Parker, found something unusual while out on his boat near a small, abandoned pier. He noticed a large duffel bag floating near the water's edge, half submerged in the muck. When he pulled it from the water, he was horrified to find that inside the bag were Jessica's clothes, neatly folded. Her purse, wallet, and cell phone were also inside. But there was no sign of Jessica herself. The discovery sent shockwaves through the town. Why would Jessica's belongings be left in such a way? And where was she? The bag was carefully placed, almost as if someone had wanted to make a statement, or perhaps misled investigators. The police quickly sent the items for forensic testing, hoping to find something that could give them a clue about her whereabouts. DNA tests confirmed that the bag and its contents were indeed Jessica's, but no traces of blood or foul play were found on the items. It was as if Jessica had simply vanished into thin air. As the investigation continued, the police focused their attention on the people closest to Jessica, starting with her ex-boyfriend, Nathan Cole. Nathan was a local fisherman who had dated Jessica for several years before their recent breakup. The relationship had ended amicably, or so everyone thought. Nathan was known to be a bit of a loner, spending most of his time on his boat, but he and Jessica had remained on good terms. However, when investigators interviewed Nathan, they uncovered a disturbing fact. He had been angry and resentful about their breakup. Nathan admitted to having argued with Jessica a few days before her disappearance. He told police that they had a heated conversation over the phone, during which Jessica told him she had moved on and was seeing someone else. Nathan insisted that the argument had ended there, but the police could sense something wasn't right. His alibi for the night of Jessica's disappearance was shaky, and neighbors reported seeing his boat near the shore where Jessica's belongings were found. The police brought Nathan in for questioning again, and this time they focused on his relationship with the water. Nathan was one of the few people in town who had access to a private dock, and it was in this area that the duffel bag had been discovered. When investigators searched Nathan's boat, they found something startling: a small bloodstain on the deck, which seemed to have been wiped away hastily. The blood was tested and confirmed to belong to Jessica. With this damning evidence, Nathan was arrested and charged with the murder of Jessica Mallory. He denied any involvement, but the evidence against him was overwhelming. Prosecutors argued that Nathan had not only killed Jessica but had tried to stage her disappearance to look like she had simply vanished. They suggested that after their argument, Nathan had confronted Jessica by the water, possibly in a fit of rage, and had drowned her, hiding her body before attempting to dispose of her things. At trial, Nathan's defense claimed that the bloodstain on his boat was a result of a minor accident while he was fishing and that he had nothing to do with Jessica's death. But the prosecution argued that his motive was clear. He was angry over the breakup, and his obsession with Jessica had led him down a deadly path. In the end, Nathan Cole was found guilty of first-degree murder. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The jury believed the evidence pointed to a calculated act of violence, followed by a disturbing attempt to cover it up. As for Jessica, her body was never found. The town of Eastport still remembers her with a mixture of sadness and disbelief. For those who knew her, Jessica's disappearance and death remain an unsolved puzzle, her final moments shrouded in mystery. Story 15. Tonight, we're uncovering a chilling case that remains one of the most baffling disappearances in American history. This is the haunting story of the disappearance of Heather Sullivan. Heather Sullivan was a 24-year-old woman living in the city of Louisville, Kentucky. A recent college graduate with a degree in marketing, Heather had big dreams and a bright future ahead of her. She had a promising job at a local advertising firm, and her social media profiles were filled with pictures of her traveling, spending time with friends, and living life to the fullest. On the surface, everything about Heather's life seemed normal, until she suddenly disappeared one rainy evening in 2011. It was a Wednesday, September 21st, when Heather was last seen. That day, she had worked a long shift at her office, and after finishing up, she made plans to meet her best friend, Lily, for dinner at a local restaurant. Heather was known to be punctual, and there was no reason to believe anything was unusual. They were supposed to meet at 7 p.m., but when Heather didn't show up by 7:30, Lily became concerned. She sent Heather a text asking if everything was okay. Heather didn't respond. Lily assumed Heather was just running late and decided to wait a bit longer. By 9 p.m., When there was still no word from Heather, Lily started calling and texting her repeatedly, but again, there was no response. Frustrated and worried, Lily went to Heather's apartment to check on her. What she found was unsettling. Heather's car was parked outside, but the door to her apartment was unlocked. The lights were off and Heather wasn't inside. Lily immediately called the police. The authorities arrived and began searching the apartment. There were no signs of forced entry or a struggle. Heather's phone, wallet, and purse were all found in her apartment, but Heather was nowhere to be found. Her bed was made, her clothes neatly hung in her closet. Nothing appeared out of place. It was as if Heather had just vanished. The police started investigating immediately, trying to piece together what had happened. They quickly learned that Heather had been out for dinner with her friend, but after that, her movements were unclear. Surveillance footage from nearby stores showed Heather walking alone on the sidewalk just after leaving the restaurant, but that was the last time anyone saw her. One of the most chilling parts of the case was the discovery of Heather's car. It was found parked in a secluded area near a park on the outskirts of Louisville. The car was locked, and there were no signs of a struggle or any signs of what might have happened to Heather. Her purse and cell phone were inside, but there was no evidence to suggest that she had been in a hurry or that she had been forced to leave her vehicle. As the investigation continued, the police began to focus on Heather's personal life. They interviewed her family and friends, hoping to uncover any potential motives. Heather's ex-boyfriend, Mark Davis, became a person of interest. Mark and Heather had dated for several months but had broken up a few weeks prior to her disappearance. Though the breakup had been amicable, there were signs that Mark had not taken it well. Police learned that Mark had been sending Heather several messages in the days leading up to her disappearance, asking her to reconsider the breakup. However, there was no indication of violence, and Heather had not mentioned any threats from him. Still, the authorities decided to interview Mark. When questioned, Mark seemed genuinely concerned and cooperative, providing an alibi for the evening of Heather's disappearance. He claimed he had been at home alone, watching TV, and had not left the house. The police were not able to disprove his alibi, but they felt there was still something off about his demeanor. Months went by with little progress. The case grew colder, and the community of Louisville was shaken by the sudden disappearance of a young woman with no clear motive or suspect. But then, something unexpected happened. In January 2012, nearly 4 months after Heather vanished, a breakthrough came in the form of a tip from an anonymous caller. The caller claimed to have seen a man near Heather's apartment on the night she disappeared. The description given by the caller matched Mark Davis. This new lead reignited the investigation. The police re-interviewed Mark, and this time, they discovered something new. They found a hidden basement room in Mark's house, which had been carefully concealed. Inside, they found disturbing evidence, a collection of photos of Heather, some taken without her knowledge. There were also several letters, written by Mark, in which he confessed his obsession with Heather and his unwillingness to accept the breakup. The police also found a bloody shirt, hidden in a box, that matched Heather's blood type. Mark was arrested and charged with Heather's kidnapping and murder. During his trial, it was revealed that Mark had been stalking Heather for weeks, unable to let go of their relationship. Obsessed with her, he had secretly followed her on the night of her disappearance and had confronted her after she left the restaurant. He had lured her into his car, telling her he needed to talk, and once they were alone, he attacked her. The bloody shirt was the result of a violent struggle, and Mark had disposed of Heather's body in an area he knew well, hoping to throw off the police. The trial was a painful experience for Heather's family, who had to hear the horrifying details of their daughter's final moments. In the end, Mark was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Heather's body was never found, but the evidence in the case provided the closure her family had desperately sought. The haunting truth behind Heather Sullivan's disappearance and murder was finally revealed. Thank you for joining us for this tragic and disturbing tale. If you have any thoughts or theories about Heather's case, we'd love to hear them in the comments. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more true crime stories. Until next time, stay vigilant and always remember, Sometimes, the most dangerous people are the ones we least suspect,